Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle, hosted by
Kilu Nyasha and engineered by
Nijada Handikich. We will bring you history and news of liberation struggles throughout the world. Kilu will interview activists involved with issues such as the war, poverty, the prison system, political prisoners, healthcare, homelessness, as well as many other issues and how they affect you. This is a live show and we will be opening our live line in about 10 minutes, so feel free to call in 415-621-4473. Tonight, we are very pleased to have Georgia Schreiber and Charles Minster. Georgia, who is the board chair of California Prison Focus, and Charles Minster, a longtime activist and supporter of the Partisan Defense Committee. The California Prison Focus works with prisoners and their families to expose human rights abuses with a larger vision of closing the SHU and ultimately abolishing the California's racist, genocidal prison system. So with that said, here's Kilu.
Thank you, Najada, and welcome both of you to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. I'm delighted to have you here this evening, and we're going to be talking, of course, about this monster prison system of ours, and particularly focusing on Pelican Bay State Prison, the monster high-tech control unit on the northwest corner of California on the Oregon border. So, Georgia Schreiber, do you want to begin talking about Prison Focus for us?
Well, my organization began as a response to the letters that were coming out of Pelican Bay State Prison when it was brand new in about 1991. Torture on par with Abu Ghraib was occurring there, and letters were coming out to activists on the outside and former prisoners trying to let them know what was happening while the people outside knew nothing. So a small group of activists, including a doctor and some attorneys, went up and interviewed prisoners, about 40 of them over a few days. And that began our organization and how we work, because it continues. And the tortures, we went last week, and the list of things prisoners are talking about have not really changed in all these years, unfortunately. But the important thing is that we not let them go on unknown about, and that we keep pushing, because a little bit of pressure has made a difference. And the minute we turn our gaze away, the problems will surge.
Right. Well, let me go to Charles Minster. Charles, how are you?
I'm fine.
Welcome.
Yeah,
and will you give us a little description, perhaps, of the Pelican Bay State Prison? You've been there. I've been there myself. Describe for our viewers exactly what that prison is like.
Well, when you arrive, you first thing I noticed was that, of course, there's two fences with razor wire on top, and there's no vegetation around the fences, no vegetation within the yard.
It's all gravel.
Yes, so that the prisoner, even if they're allowed outside, which of course people in the SHU get out about 1 hour a week to run around in like a dog pound.
It's like another enclosed outdoor space
in which they can
20-foot high walls.
Probably no bigger than this studio.
Right.
And the first thing I thought of, just imagine if George Bush was put in this place for 1 week, he'd probably be selling his firstborn to get out.
Oh.
And that's what I could imagine them doing.
I think he would just go nuts. I don't think he has the strength to endure anything like that.
Probably right. But I could see just the first thing, in a revolutionary government would be to destroy it completely. I mean,
well, I'm a prison abolitionist myself. I don't believe in locking people in cages at all. And these control units, and I understand there are some 35 or 6 control units nationwide now. They're called supermax prisons, and they oppress the prisoners with sensory deprivation in the extreme. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, Georgia?
psychiatrists have been studying this, and they've actually named this the SHU syndrome, which stands for Security Housing Unit, which is the supermax, the name of this supermax, kind of on the West Coast.
It's a prison within the prison.
A prison within the prison, and what Charles, when he was describing Pelican Bay, one remarkable thing about the SHU is there are no windows. It's like a Mormon temple, and you just think these guys don't see the sky, and they don't really get an open sky above them. So they really aren't used to seeing more than about 10 feet in front of them, all gray all the time. They never have human contact in the SHU. It's solitary confinement for years on end. And you lose a sense of perspective from, within space, in a spatial sense, and also in a sense when you think about how important it is to relate to other people, to just get a sense of what's going on and what reality is. And these guys actually, part of the SHU syndrome is a very short temper and, inability to control your impulses, and every little thing makes you as angry as the biggest things we can think of. And they literally lose their skin color. They have a gray pallor.
I never saw so many light-skinned black folks in
yeah.
my life when I went up there.
It's terrible.
Yes.
It's really,
yeah,
and they're
very
preserved
pale.
too. I mean, no sun for years. It's a very bizarre and seriously detrimental physically and mentally.
Absolutely. And the overwhelming majority of prisoners are prisoners of color, and the majority are Latinos, and many of them are sent all the way from Southern California, from LA.
This is another tactic. They're literally removed so far from their families that they can't even get family visits. If their families come up, they don't get to touch them.
Right.
It's a very
no
sick
contact
situation.
visits. It's like talking to somebody in a phone booth. Charles, you just visited Hugo Pinell very recently. Would you describe the visit and who Hugo Pinell is? We also call him Yogi Bear.
Yeah, Yogi. Well, Yogi's been in prison now for 44 years. Originally put in prison for a minor offense. It wasn't a nice offense, but it was a minor in comparison to many people that are in there. And then he was in San Quentin during the 60s, during the upheavals around the country, in which people in prison were fighting for their rights. And Hugo was caught up in that. He was inspired by it, George Jackson being one of the people that inspired him.
And W.L. Nolan.
That's right. And became involved with the San Quentin 6 struggle, which was after George had been killed, and the breakout at the courthouse, and Angela Davis, and there was a guard who was killed, and he was brought up on that and sentenced for that in an indeterminate sentence. All the other members of the San Quentin 6 are out, and he's the only one left.